Inglés. Ethan Mitchell stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, his eyes scanning the lavish decorations that adorned the walls. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like glistening jewels, casting a warm glow over the sea of elegantly dressed guests. The air was thick with the mingling scents of gourmet, hors d'oeuvres, and expensive perfumes, each scent more intoxicating than the last. He adjusted his perfectly tailored suit, a deep navy blue that complemented his sharp features, and took a deep breath, steeling himself for the evening ahead. As the CEO of a highly successful tech firm, Ethan was no stranger to such opulence. Yet, despite the laughter and chatter that surrounded him, a profound sense of emptiness gnawed at him. He watched as his peers clinked champagne glasses, exchanging hollow pleasantries and backhanded compliments, and felt a deep disconnection from the scene unfolding around him. "Is this what success is?" he mused silently, contemplating the empty accolades and superficial friendships that filled his life. "Ethan, over here!" a familiar voice called out, breaking his reverie. It was Jonathan, his business partner, waving him over with a broad grin. Jonathan was the embodiment of everything Ethan often found irksome, the type who thrived in social settings, relishing the attention and admiration that came with their status. Ethan forced a smile as he approached, the weight of his discontent momentarily overshadowed by the need to maintain appearances. "Look at the crowd tonight. We're going to raise a fortune for the charity," Jonathan exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "And you know what that means for us, right? More press, more clients. This is our moment." Ethan nodded, though his enthusiasm felt feigned. "Yes, it's impressive," he replied, his gaze drifting to a group of guests gathered around a particularly lavish display of art. "But do you think anyone cares about the cause, or is it just a chance to flaunt their wealth?" Jonathan chuckled, clapping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You sound like a cynic, my friend. This is New York. People love to show off, but they also want to be seen as generous. It's all part of the game. Besides, charity is charity, right?" Ethan offered a non-committal grunt, his thoughts still lingering on the emptiness that seemed to accompany his every success. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he longed for something more genuine, something that could fill the void he felt despite the accolades and the wealth he had amassed. He turned away from Jonathan, seeking solace in a quieter corner of the ballroom. Meanwhile, in a drastically different part of the city, Thomas Reed was sitting in the dim light of his rundown apartment. The walls were a faded yellow, peeling in places, and the furniture was a mismatched collection of hand-me-downs. As he hunched over his desk, surrounded by crumpled papers and half-finished projects, the sounds of his daughter Lily's laughter filled the air, a sweet reminder of why he fought so hard each day. "Daddy, look!" Lily exclaimed, her small voice breaking through the murmur of the city outside. She held up a crayon drawing with pride, her bright eyes sparkling. "I made this for you." Thomas turned, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. You've really captured the sun shining down on the flowers," he said, taking the drawing and pinning it to the wall next to several other colorful creations. "You always make my day better, Lily." Lily giggled, her innocence a refreshing balm to the stresses that weighed heavily on Thomas's shoulders. As a single father with bills piling up and a low-paying job as a graphic designer, he often felt overwhelmed. But moments like this, moments filled with laughter and love, reminded him of the beauty in life's struggles. "Can we paint together after dinner?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. "Of course. We'll make our own masterpiece," he replied, ruffling her hair affectionately. As he turned back to his work, the flicker of optimism surged within him. He was working late on a project that could bring in some much-needed extra income, and he had promised himself that he wouldn't let the exhaustion win. The evening wore on, and as Thomas immersed himself in the task at hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. His phone buzzed, a notification from a friend inviting him to a charity gala that evening. It was an opportunity he couldn't ignore, the chance to showcase his artwork alongside other local artists. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to go. He dressed in his best shirt, one that had seen better days but still fit him well, and grabbed a small portfolio that contained his latest paintings. This could be the break I need, he thought, determination flooding through him. Back at the gala, Ethan had retreated to the balcony, seeking a moment of peace away from the dazzling crowd. He leaned against the railing, looking out over the sparkling skyline of New York, the city that never slept. The view was breathtaking, but it did little to ease the nagging feeling that something was missing in his life. He sighed, closing his eyes for a moment, allowing the cool night air to wash over him. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see a man standing beside him, a rugged charm about him that contrasted with the polished crowd below. Ethan recognized him from the event, a local artist whose work had caught his eye earlier. "There's a certain magic in the chaos," the man continued, his gaze fixed on the city. "It's alive, full of stories waiting to be told." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You're an artist?" he asked, gesturing toward the gallery inside. "Thomas Reed," the man introduced himself, extending a hand. "I'm one of the featured artists tonight, just trying to make a name for myself." "Ethan Mitchell," he replied, shaking Thomas's hand firmly. "I have to say, your work is compelling." "Thank you," Thomas replied, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I didn't think anyone would notice with all the, well, everything else happening in there." He gestured back towards the gala, where laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. "I know what you mean," Ethan admitted, feeling a warmth toward this stranger who appeared so genuine. "It's easy to get lost in the crowd." Before the conversation could deepen, Jonathan appeared, his presence imposing. "Ethan, there you are!" he boomed, clapping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Come on, we need you back in the mix. You can't be out here chatting with, the help." His gaze fell on Thomas, a hint of disdain creeping into his tone. Ethan's expression hardened as he felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness for Thomas. "Jonathan, this is Thomas Reed. He's an artist, and I was just discussing his work." "Right," Jonathan replied dismissively, an insincere smile plastered on his face. "Well, we have donors to impress. Nice to meet you, Thomas." With that, he turned on his heel, pulling Ethan back toward the thrumming heart of the gala, leaving Thomas standing alone, a hint of disappointment shadowing his features. Ethan felt a pang of guilt as he followed Jonathan, his mind racing with thoughts of missed opportunities and the connection he had just begun to forge. Little did he know, this chance encounter would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything he believed about success, friendship, and the true meaning of fulfillment. Ethan Mitchell awoke to the soft golden light filtering through the expansive windows of his penthouse. Despite the luxurious surroundings, he felt an unsettling heaviness in his chest. The vibrant colors of his art collection seemed muted today, and he couldn't shake off the thoughts from the gala the previous night. The encounter with Thomas Reed lingered in his mind like a haunting melody, one that tugged at his conscience. Pacing the marble floor, Ethan replayed their brief conversation. Thomas had spoken with a quiet passion about his work, his eyes lighting up at the mere mention of his daughter, Lily. The contrast between their worlds was stark. Ethan, a man of privilege, and Thomas, a father, grappling with the weight of responsibility. He was struck by the depth of Thomas's character, an authenticity that felt refreshing amidst the superficiality of the elite he often mingled with. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by his assistant, Sarah, who entered the room holding a stack of documents. "Good morning, Ethan. I have the reports you requested." She paused, noticing his distracted demeanor. "Is everything all right?" "Yeah, just thinking about last night," he replied, his voice trailing off. He couldn't shake off the nagging desire to do something meaningful. Later that day, as he sat in his spacious office overlooking the bustling city, Ethan made a decision that surprised even himself. He pulled out his phone and searched for Thomas's contact number, which he had stored after their brief encounter. With a deep breath, he dialed. "Hello?" Thomas's voice came through, warm yet cautious. "Hi, Thomas. It's Ethan Mitchell. We met at the gala last night." "Ethan. Of course I remember," Thomas responded, his surprise evident. "How can I help you?" Ethan hesitated, feeling a rush of vulnerability. "I wanted to talk about your artwork. I was really impressed. I'd like to purchase one of your paintings." "Really?" Thomas's voice was a mix of disbelief and excitement. "That would be incredible. I mean, thank you." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of purpose. "Let's arrange a time for me to see your work. I want to support local artists, and your pieces stood out to me." "That would be great. I have a few pieces at my place. How about tomorrow afternoon?" "Perfect. I'll see you then." As they ended the call, Ethan felt a warmth spread through him that he hadn't experienced in years. This simple act of kindness felt like a step towards something more meaningful. Meanwhile, Thomas Reed sat at his small dining table, the clutter around him a testament to his chaotic life. He had just returned home from a long day of work when his phone buzzed with a notification. As he saw Ethan's name flash on the screen, his heart raced. Could it be? Was he truly interested in his art? After the call, Thomas stood up, pacing the room as hope surged within him. "Lily!" he called out, searching for his daughter. She emerged from her bedroom, her little face smeared with paint from her latest project. "Yes, Daddy?" she asked, her big eyes wide with curiosity. "You won't believe it. A man from the gala wants to buy one of my paintings." His voice was filled with both excitement and disbelief. "Really? The one with the big tree?" Lily asked, bouncing on her tiny feet. "Yes. He said he liked it. This could really help us, sweetie." Thomas knelt down to her level, his heart swelling with pride. "Maybe we can finally get some new furniture, or even a treat." Lily's eyes sparkled. "Can we get ice cream?" Thomas chuckled, ruffling her hair. "Ice cream it is. But first, we have to make sure he really wants to buy it." As he spoke, a vision of a better life for both of them emerged in his mind. A life where he could provide more than just the basics. The next day, as Ethan arrived at Thomas's modest apartment, he felt a sense of anticipation mixed with nervousness. The building was a far cry from his upscale neighborhood, its faded paint and worn-down exterior, telling stories of residents who fought daily battles. As he climbed the stairs, he couldn't help but wonder what had compelled him to venture into this world. Thomas greeted him at the door, his face lighting up with gratitude. "Ethan, thank you for coming." "Thanks for having me," Ethan replied, stepping into the small but cozy living room. The walls were adorned with an array of paintings, each one telling a different story, vibrant colors leaping out at him. "Your work is incredible." "Thank you. I've poured a lot of myself into these pieces," Thomas said, pride evident in his tone as he gestured to a large canvas with a sprawling oak tree. "This one is my favorite. It represents strength and resilience, something I've always tried to embody, especially for Lily." Ethan studied the painting, feeling an unexpected connection to its meaning. "It's beautiful. I can see why it resonates with you." He turned to Thomas, the weight of his own life pressing on him. "Tell me, what inspired you to create it?" Thomas took a deep breath, his gaze drifting to the window. "It's a reflection of my journey as a father. I want Lily to grow up strong and unyielding, no matter what life throws at us." His voice softened. "I want her to know that even when things are tough, she can always find her roots and grow." Ethan nodded, moved by the depth of Thomas's words. "I admire that. It's not easy being a single parent." "No, it's not." Thomas smiled wistfully. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything. She's my motivation." As they continued discussing the paintings, Ethan felt a shift within himself. He had always measured success by wealth and status. But here was Thomas, a man who found richness in love and resilience. It was a perspective he had long ignored. Later, as they finalized the details of the purchase, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his business partner, Mark. "Are you still on for lunch? We need to discuss the upcoming merger." Ethan glanced at Thomas, who was carefully wrapping the painting. He felt a twinge of obligation to Mark, but the thought of returning to that world felt suffocating. "Hey, Thomas, do you mind if I take a rain check on lunch?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "I think I need to stay here a little longer." Thomas looked up, surprised but grateful. "Of course, take your time." As Ethan spent more time with Thomas, he began to see the beauty in the struggle, the hope in the mundane. They shared stories and laughter, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt invigorated by genuine human connection. Meanwhile, at a high-end restaurant in the heart of the city, Mark sat tapping his fingers impatiently at the table. When Ethan finally arrived, Mark's expression was a mix of annoyance and curiosity. "Where have you been? You know how important this meeting is." "I know, Mark," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "But I had something important to take care of." Mark scoffed. "Important? Like what? Supporting some struggling artist? You really think that's a wise investment? The little guy? Come on, Ethan, you're smarter than that." Ethan's heart raced as he felt his blood boil. "You don't understand, Mark. It's not just about the money. It's about something real." Mark leaned back, crossing his arms. "Real? You think supporting some guy with a paintbrush is going to change your life? This is business, not charity." Ethan's frustration boiled over, and he shook his head. "It's not just charity. It's about community, humanity, something you wouldn't understand." Mark laughed mockingly. "Humanity doesn't pay the bills, my friend. You need to wake up. You're getting soft." Ethan clenched his jaw, his internal conflict deepening. The contrast between his life with Mark and the genuine connection he felt with Thomas was stark. Maybe being soft is what I need right now. As he left the restaurant, Ethan felt a shift within him. He had a choice to make: continue down the path of superficial success with Mark, or embrace a new way of living that aligned with the values he had rediscovered through Thomas. The decision loomed heavily over him, but for the first time, he felt hopeful about the possibility of change. Ethan Mitchell drove through the winding streets of Thomas Reed's neighborhood, a stark contrast to the polished avenues of Manhattan he was accustomed to. As his luxury car rolled past dilapidated buildings and weathered storefronts, he felt a stir of unease in his stomach. The vibrant murals painted on crumbling walls told stories of resilience and hope, yet the surroundings spoke of struggle and neglect. He parked outside a modest brownstone, its paint peeling and windows slightly fogged, and stepped out, the warmth of the day clashing with the cold reality of the community. Ethan took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of street food and distant laughter. He remembered the conversation he had shared with Thomas at the gala, a fleeting moment that lingered in his mind. He had been drawn to the artist's passion, the way he spoke about his daughter Lily, and the dreams he held despite his circumstances. Today, he wanted to understand more about that life. As he approached the door, he hesitated, his hand hovering above the brass knob. What was he doing here? This was not his world. He was a man of boardrooms and high-stakes deals, not one of playgrounds and community centers. But the thought of Thomas and the connection they had begun to forge compelled him to knock. The door creaked open, revealing Thomas, who wore an apron splattered with paint and flour. He looked surprised, yet pleased to see Ethan. "Ethan, I wasn't expecting you," he said, stepping aside to let him in. "Hi, Thomas. I wanted to see your neighborhood, to understand more about you and your life," Ethan replied, stepping into the small living room that was filled with colorful artwork and the soft sound of a TV playing in the background. "It's not much, but it's home," Thomas said, gesturing around. "Come on in. Lily is just finishing up her homework." Ethan observed the modesty of the space, the worn-out couch, the mismatched chairs, and the small kitchen area where pots and pans hung above the stove. Each item seemed to tell a story of perseverance. As he took a seat on the couch, he noticed a few of Thomas's paintings leaning against the wall. Your work is incredible, Ethan said, pointing to a vibrant piece filled with swirling colors and abstract shapes. I can see your passion in every brushstroke. Thanks, man, Thomas said, his face lighting up. That one is about hope. I wanted to capture the feeling of looking towards a brighter future, even when things seem dark. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of Thomas's words. This artist, struggling to make ends meet, had a depth of understanding that he had yet to grasp in his own life. Just then a small voice piped up from the kitchen. "Daddy, can I have a snack now?" Lily's voice was sweet and innocent, cutting through the atmosphere like a ray of sunshine. "Just a minute, sweetheart. I have a guest," Thomas called back, then turned to Ethan with an apologetic smile. "That's Lily. She's been waiting for me to finish dinner so we can have some fun together." "Dinner smells great," Ethan said, taking in the aroma of garlic and herbs wafting through the air. "You're cooking." "Just a simple pasta dish," Thomas replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "I tried to make it special for Lily. She loves it." "Can I help?" Ethan offered, surprising himself with the eagerness in his tone. "Really? You want to cook with me?" Thomas asked, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Why not? I've never really cooked a meal outside of the occasional microwave dinner," Ethan admitted with a chuckle. Thomas laughed, a sound that seemed to fill the room with warmth. "All right then, let's do this." As they moved into the kitchen, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie develop between them. Thomas guided him through the steps, showing him how to chop vegetables and stir the sauce. They laughed and exchanged stories, Ethan sharing tales of his childhood and Thomas recounting the challenges of being a single father. "You know, it's not easy," Thomas said, stirring the pot. "But Lily keeps me going. She's my everything." Ethan paused, looking into Thomas's eyes. "I can see that. You're a good father." "Thanks, man. I just want to give her a better life than I had," Thomas replied, sincerity evident in his voice. "Sometimes it feels like I'm fighting an uphill battle." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy with empathy. "I can relate to that. I've spent so much of my life chasing success, but I often wonder if I'm missing what truly matters." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a bond forming over shared experiences and aspirations. As they plated the food, Lily bounded into the room, her pigtails bouncing with each step. "Daddy, are we ready to eat?" she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "Almost, pumpkin. We just need to set the table," Thomas replied, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Ethan, you can help Lily with that," he added, glancing at Ethan with a smile. "She's quite the expert." With a grin, Ethan knelt down to Lily's level. "All right, little chef, what do we need?" "Plates, forks, and napkins. Oh, and don't forget the juice," Lily declared, her tiny hands moving enthusiastically as she gathered the items. As they set the table together, Ethan found himself smiling more than he had in a long time. This simple act of sharing a meal, of being part of a family moment, filled a void he hadn't realized existed. When they finally sat down to eat, he felt a warmth in his chest as they shared laughter and stories, the food a backdrop to their growing friendship. After dinner, with plates cleared and the kitchen tidied, Thomas suggested they head to the community center where he volunteered. "You'll see a different side of the neighborhood," he said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Ethan agreed, intrigued by the opportunity to immerse himself further in Thomas's world. They walked side by side, the evening air cool and refreshing. As they approached the center, the sounds of laughter and chatter grew louder, a lively spirit emanating from within. Inside, the center was bustling with activity. Children played games, and adults gathered for classes and workshops. Ethan felt a sense of belonging among the chaos, the warmth of community wrapping around him like a comforting blanket. "Hey everyone, this is Ethan," Thomas announced, his voice cutting through the noise. "He's here to help us tonight." A few heads turned, curious eyes assessing Ethan. He felt a flutter of nerves but reminded himself of the purpose behind his visit. This was not about him. It was about supporting Thomas and the community. As the evening progressed, Ethan found himself engaging with the children, helping them with art projects and sharing stories. He discovered a side of himself he had long neglected, the ability to connect, to empathize, and to give back. Laughter filled the air as he watched the children create colorful masterpieces, their faces lighting up with pride and joy. But amidst the laughter, a familiar face appeared at the entrance, Ethan's business partner, Greg. Dressed in a tailored suit, he surveyed the scene with a scowl, his presence a stark contrast to the warmth of the community center. Ethan's stomach dropped as Greg's eyes landed on him. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" Greg's voice was sharp, cutting through the joyous atmosphere. Ethan straightened, feeling the weight of his partner's disapproval. "I'm just helping out, Greg. It's a community event." "Helping out? With these people?" Greg scoffed, his disdain palpable. "You need to remember where you came from. This is not your world." Ethan felt anger bubbling within him, but he held his ground. "These people are just as deserving of respect and support as anyone else, Greg." Greg's expression hardened, and he glanced around, his contempt evident. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. Associating with them will only ruin your reputation." Thomas stepped forward, his demeanor calm yet firm. "Ethan is here because he wants to be. We're building something real here, and it's more valuable than any reputation you think you have." Ethan's heart raced as he looked between his partner and Thomas, feeling the tension in the air. For the first time, he realized the true weight of his choices. Would he allow Greg's judgment to dictate his actions, or would he stand by the man who had shown him a different perspective on life? The realization washed over him like a wave, and he felt a surge of courage. It was time to embrace the values he had been neglecting. The kindness, humility, and authenticity that were far more important than the hollow accolades of the business world. Ethan Mitchell leaned back in his plush leather chair, staring out the expansive window of his high-rise office. The skyline of New York City sparkled in the fading light, each twinkling light a reminder of the wealth and power that surrounded him. Yet in stark contrast to the grandeur outside, an unsettling emptiness gnawed at his insides. His mind drifted back to Thomas Reed, the struggling artist he had met at the gala. The recollection of their conversations lingered, and the image of Thomas's bright-eyed daughter, Lily, flashed in his mind. Would he dare to risk his reputation for the sake of this newfound friendship? As if on cue, his partner, Craig Harrison, stormed into the office, his expression taut with irritation. "Ethan, we need to talk," he snapped, his voice cutting through the silence. Craig had always been the embodiment of ambition and ruthlessness, qualities that had propelled their company to great heights. However, it was precisely these traits that had begun to weigh heavily on Ethan. "About what?" Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone neutral, though he could sense the tension in the air. "About this ridiculous notion of yours to support that artist, Reed," Craig spat, crossing his arms tightly over his chest. "You cannot be serious. Associating with someone like him is a liability. Do you understand that? This is a business, not a charity." Ethan felt his heart race at Craig's words. "Thomas isn't just some little guy, Craig. He has talent. He's trying to provide for his daughter." "This isn't just business for me," Ethan retorted, his voice firm. "It's about doing what's right." Craig's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Right? What's right is keeping your image intact. You think the high rollers will want to associate with you if they see you mingling with the common folk? This is a dangerous game you're playing." Ethan clenched his fists, feeling the weight of Craig's words. The pressure to maintain his social status was suffocating, yet something deep inside him rebelled against the idea of abandoning Thomas. "I'm not abandoning anyone, Craig. I'm supporting him." "Then you're making a grave mistake." Craig's tone was icy, and he turned on his heel, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. The confrontation had rattled him, yet it also ignited a spark of determination. He knew he had to make a choice, one that could alter the course of his life. Meanwhile, in a cramped apartment that had seen better days, Thomas Reed sat at a rickety table, flipping through bills that seemed to multiply by the day. The eviction notice from his landlord lay ominously atop the stack, a reminder of the precariousness of his situation. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his disheveled hair as he glanced over at his daughter, Lily, who was engrossed in her coloring book. Her laughter echoed through the small space, a sound that brought him both joy and pain. "Daddy, look! I made a rainbow!" Lily exclaimed, holding up her masterpiece, a swirl of colors that brightened the otherwise drab room. Thomas forced a smile, though his heart ached with the burden of their reality. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he replied, pulling her into a gentle hug. "You're an artist, just like me." "But Daddy, I can't sell my rainbows," she giggled, her innocence a balm to his troubled soul. In that moment, Thomas felt the weight of the world lift just a little, but as soon as it came, the anxiety returned. The landlord's threats echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing his daughter. Later that evening, as Thomas prepared a modest dinner, the doorbell rang. He opened the door to find Ethan standing there, looking somewhat disheveled, but determined. "Hey, I hope I'm not interrupting," Ethan said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Not at all. Come in," Thomas replied, stepping aside. "I was just about to make some pasta. Want to join?" Ethan hesitated for just a moment before stepping inside. "Sure, I'd love that." As he entered, he was struck by the warmth of the space, despite its obvious wear and tear. It was a stark contrast to his own sterile, modern apartment. As they sat at the table, the aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, and Thomas served the pasta. "So, how's everything going with your company?" Thomas asked, trying to keep the conversation light, even as he felt the weight of his own struggles pressing down on him. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, it's complicated. My partner, he's not exactly on board with the idea of me helping you out. He thinks it's a bad move for my image." Thomas paused, his fork hovering over his plate. "You know, sometimes I wish I had that kind of pressure. I mean, I'd trade my struggles for a suit and a corner office any day." Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You'd be surprised. It's not all it's cracked up to be. The more you have, the more people expect from you. It's hard to find genuine connections." "I get that," Thomas said, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "But I think the real connections are the ones that matter, right? Like the ones we're building here." Ethan looked up, surprised by Thomas's insight. "Yeah, exactly," he admitted. "But it's scary. Craig really wants me to cut ties with you. He believes it'll tarnish my reputation." "Reputation, huh?" Thomas leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "I used to care about that too, before everything fell apart. But now, all that matters is Lily. If I can provide for her and give her a good life, that's my success." Ethan nodded, moved by Thomas's words. He couldn't help but admire the man's resilience in the face of adversity. "You're a good dad, Thomas. I can see how much you care about her," he said softly. "Thanks, Ethan. It's tough sometimes, but I try my best," Thomas replied, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "I just hope I can keep this roof over our heads." The conversation lingered in the air, and both men felt a deepening bond forming between them. However, the unspoken tensions still loomed large, particularly in Ethan's mind, as he grappled with the reality of his partnership with Craig. As the evening wore on, Ethan's resolve began to crystallize. He knew he had to confront Craig, to stand his ground. The thought of losing Thomas's friendship over societal expectations felt ludicrous. When he returned to his office the next day, the decision weighed heavily on him, but he steeled himself for the confrontation. "Craig," Ethan said, walking into the conference room where his partner was already seated, reviewing some documents. "We need to talk." Craig looked up, his expression unreadable. "About what? More of your nonsense with that artist?" "Actually, yes. I'm not going to cut ties with Thomas. He's a good person, and I want to continue supporting him," Ethan declared, his voice steady. Craig's face darkened, his patience wearing thin. This isn't a charity, Ethan. You're putting your reputation on the line for someone who doesn't belong in your world. Ethan took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. Maybe I don't want to be in that world anymore. Maybe I want to be in a world where kindness matters more than status. Silence filled the room as Craig's eyes narrowed, disbelief etched on his face. You're making a huge mistake, Ethan. You'll regret this. I'd rather regret standing up for what's right than living in fear of what others think, Ethan replied, his heart racing but his conviction unwavering. As he turned to leave, he felt the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders, but there was also a sense of liberation. It was a step into the unknown, but it was one he was willing to take for the sake of a friendship that had already begun to change him. Meanwhile, Thomas remained oblivious to the storm brewing in Ethan's corporate world. He focused on his daughter, their shared moments of laughter and creativity, providing a brief respite from the hardships of life. Yet, both men were on the brink of a revelation that would not only test their friendship, but also redefine their understanding of success and what it truly meant to be there for someone in need. The evening sun dipped behind the skyline of New York City, casting an amber glow that illuminated the bustling streets. Inside a trendy art gallery nestled in the heart of Chelsea, a crowd buzzed with excitement. The walls, adorned with vibrant paintings, each telling a story of struggle and resilience, were a testament to Thomas Reed's evolving artistry. In the midst of this newfound success, Thomas stood by his artwork, an inexplicable mixture of pride and anxiety bubbling within him. "Ethan, can you believe this?" Thomas exclaimed, his voice barely rising above the din. He turned to Ethan Mitchell, who stood beside him, a look of genuine admiration etched across his face. "It's incredible, Thomas. Your work is finally getting the recognition it deserves," Ethan replied, his deep voice resonating with warmth. He had taken on the role of a staunch supporter, attending every show, every showcase, and celebrating Thomas's victories as if they were his own. Thomas's eyes sparkled as he surveyed the crowd. "I owe it all to you. If you hadn't bought that first piece, I don't think I'd be here right now." He paused, his thoughts drifting back to the moment they first met at the charity gala. "You gave me hope when I needed it the most." Ethan smiled, feeling the weight of their shared journey. "You earned this, Thomas. Your talent speaks for itself." As more guests filtered in, the atmosphere grew electric. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air while the scent of fine wine wafted through the gallery. The two friends exchanged stories and laughter, reveling in the moment. But unbeknownst to them, looming at the entrance was Ethan's business partner, Derek, a man who thrived on manipulation and intimidation. Derek stepped into the gallery, his presence immediately shifting the energy. Clad in an expensive suit, he scanned the room with a smirk that betrayed his disdain. Spotting Ethan and Thomas, he strode over, his confidence radiating like a dark cloud. "Ethan, I see you found a new hobby," Derek sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. "Supporting artists? How quaint." Thomas bristled at the insult, but Ethan held up a hand, a glare directed at Derek. "This is not a joke, Derek. Thomas's work is exceptional. Maybe you should look beyond your narrow perspective." Derek chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "Oh, please. Just because you bought a few pieces doesn't mean you're a patron of the arts. What's next? A bake sale?" Thomas clenched his jaw, anger rising within him. "I'm not here to entertain your jabs, Derek. This is about art, not your arrogance." Ethan stepped forward, sensing the tension escalating. "Enough. You're ruining the mood. This is a celebration, and I won't stand by while you belittle Thomas." Derek's eyes narrowed, catching the attention of nearby guests who began to lean in, intrigued by the unfolding drama. "Are you really going to choose this artist over me, Ethan? What does that say about your judgment?" A hush fell over the crowd, the atmosphere thickening with anticipation. Thomas felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. He had fought tooth and nail to get to this moment, and he refused to let Derek tarnish it. "Let me ask you something, Derek," Thomas spoke, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "What does it say about your character to belittle someone else's passion? This isn't just art to me. It's my life, my daughter's future. You wouldn't understand." Derek's expression darkened, his smirk faltering. "Oh, I understand perfectly. I just don't think people like you belong in the same room as those who actually matter." The crowd shifted, whispers of discontent breaking out among the attendees. Ethan could feel the tide turning. He had to act, and fast. "Listen, Derek," Ethan said, his voice rising above the murmurs. "You may have been my partner in business, but that doesn't mean I condone your behavior. You're trying to sabotage someone who's worked hard to get where he is. You're a bully, plain and simple." Derek's face flushed with anger. "You think you can just turn your back on me? I made this company what it is." "And what is it exactly?" Ethan challenged, his heart racing. "A place where we tear down the dreams of others? I refuse to be a part of that any longer." Thomas stood rooted to the spot, shocked by the boldness of Ethan's words. He had never seen this side of the wealthy entrepreneur, a man who was willing to risk everything for a friendship that had blossomed against all odds. "You're making a mistake, Ethan," Derek warned, his voice low and menacing. "You won't just lose your partnership, you'll lose everything. Think about it." Ethan glanced at Thomas, who looked back at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "No," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "I've thought about it, and I choose to stand with Thomas. I choose integrity over profit. I choose friendship over fear." The crowd erupted into murmurs, some nodding in agreement, while others looked on in astonishment. Thomas felt a rush of emotions, gratitude, admiration, and an overwhelming sense of camaraderie. "You're making a huge mistake," Derek spat, but his words fell flat against the growing tide of support for Ethan and Thomas. "I think you're the one making a mistake," a voice from the crowd called out. It was a local artist who had been quietly observing the confrontation. "You're outnumbered, Derek. The people here value authenticity and talent, not your petty jealousy." With that, the crowd began to rally, voices rising in support of Thomas. "Let him be!" someone shouted, while others chimed in with encouragement. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, turning against Derek. Realizing he was losing his grip, Derek sneered, attempting one last desperate jab. "You'll regret this, Ethan. You'll see." But it was too late. The crowd had turned, and the energy was palpable. Ethan stepped closer to Thomas, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've earned this moment, Thomas. Don't let anyone take it away from you." As Derek stormed out of the gallery, the tension that had weighed heavily moments before evaporated. The guests erupted into applause, celebrating not just Thomas's success, but also the power of standing up for what is right. Thomas beamed, overwhelmed with emotion. "I can't believe you did that, Ethan. You stood up for me." Ethan smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from him. "You're my friend, Thomas. It's what friends do." In that moment, surrounded by the cheers of support, both men understood that their lives had irrevocably changed. It wasn't just about art or business. It was about human connection, the strength that comes from standing up for one another, and the realization that true success isn't measured by wealth, but by the bonds we forge. As the gallery continued to buzz with excitement, Thomas and Ethan exchanged glances, their friendship solidified in the face of adversity, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead together. Ethan Mitchell stood at the sprawling window of his penthouse, gazing out at the glittering skyline of New York City. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the buildings, but his heart felt heavy. The recent events weighed on him. His confrontation with his partner, the charity gala, and most importantly, his growing friendship with Thomas Reed. It was a strange feeling, this internal conflict. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, meticulously crafting a persona that revolved around wealth and status. Yet the sense of fulfillment he once derived from that world had all but vanished. His thoughts drifted to Thomas, the struggling artist he'd met at the gala. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, there was something genuine about Thomas that resonated with Ethan. The way he spoke about his daughter, Lily, the pride in his voice as he described his artistic vision, it was refreshing in a world filled with insincerity. Ethan's phone buzzed on the glass table, pulling him from his reverie. It was a text from Thomas, inviting him over to the studio for a small celebration. The message was simple, yet it ignited a spark of excitement within him. Later that evening, Ethan arrived at Thomas's modest studio, a quaint space filled with vibrant colors and the scent of fresh paint. The walls were adorned with Thomas's artwork, each piece telling a story of struggle, hope, and resilience. Thomas greeted him with a warm smile, his eyes lighting up as he opened the door. "Ethan, I'm so glad you could make it," he exclaimed, pulling Ethan into a brief, enthusiastic embrace. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Ethan replied, feeling an unexpected rush of warmth at Thomas's genuine welcome. Inside, the atmosphere was filled with a sense of camaraderie. A few close friends and fellow artists mingled, laughter echoing against the walls. Ethan felt out of place yet strangely comfortable. He had been to countless high-profile events, but this was different. This was real. Thomas poured them both a glass of wine, and they moved to a corner where a large canvas stood, partially covered with a white sheet. "Before we celebrate, I want to show you something," Thomas said, a hint of excitement in his voice. He pulled the sheet away, revealing a breathtaking mural that captured the essence of the neighborhood. The vibrancy, the struggles, and the beauty of everyday life. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sweeping strokes of color and emotion. "This is incredible, Thomas. You've captured so much," he said, genuinely impressed. "Thank you. I just got commissioned to paint this for the community center. I can't believe it." Thomas's eyes sparkled with joy. "It's a big deal for me, and I owe a lot of it to you." Ethan shook his head, a modest smile forming on his lips. "You earned this. Your talent deserves to be seen. I'm just glad I could help in some way." Their conversation was interrupted as a friend of Thomas approached, raising a toast. "To Thomas and his incredible talent, may this mural be just the beginning." Everyone raised their glasses, and cheers erupted in the small studio. As laughter filled the air, Ethan felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. He clinked glasses with Thomas, their eyes meeting in a moment of understanding and shared triumph. As the evening progressed, the group shared stories, and Ethan found himself opening up about his own struggles, his internal battles with his partner, the expectations of his world, and the emptiness that followed him like a shadow. Thomas listened intently, nodding as if understanding the weight of Ethan's words. "You know, it's never too late to redefine what success means to you," Thomas said thoughtfully. "For me, it's not just about selling art. It's about making a difference, telling stories that matter." Ethan pondered those words, feeling their impact settle deep within him. "I've been so focused on profits and status that I lost sight of what truly matters," he admitted, the vulnerability in his voice surprising even himself. Later that night, as the guests began to leave, Ethan lingered, helping Thomas clean up. "I really appreciate you sharing this moment with me," Thomas said, his voice softening. "It means a lot to have someone like you in my corner." Ethan smiled, a newfound confidence emerging. "I'm grateful for our friendship, Thomas. It's refreshing to connect with someone who values integrity over prestige." As they finished tidying up, Ethan's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his partner. The tone was curt, demanding a meeting to discuss the fallout from the gallery incident. Ethan felt a wave of dread wash over him, but he shook it off. He had made his choice. He would no longer let fear dictate his actions. The next day, Ethan sat in his office, the weight of the decision he was about to make heavy on his shoulders. He called his assistant, requesting an urgent meeting with his partner. When the man entered the room, The tension was palpable. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation. "I can't continue working with you," Ethan stated firmly, meeting his partner's gaze. "Your actions at the gallery were unacceptable, and I refuse to associate with someone who lacks integrity." His partner's face twisted in disbelief. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. You're jeopardizing everything we've built." Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady. "What we've built is built on lies and deceit. I won't be a part of it anymore." The conversation escalated, accusations flying back and forth, but Ethan stood his ground. He had come to realize that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the relationships he nurtured and the integrity he upheld. Finally, his partner stormed out, leaving Ethan with a sense of relief and empowerment. Later that week, as he and Thomas met for coffee in a quaint cafe, Ethan shared the news. "I severed ties with my partner," he said, a mix of pride and apprehension in his voice. Thomas's eyes widened, and a broad grin spread across his face. "That's amazing, Ethan. You did what was right for you, and that takes courage." Ethan chuckled, feeling buoyed by Thomas's enthusiasm. "It feels liberating, honestly. I want to align my business with my values, and I want to support artists like you." Their conversation shifted to Thomas's mural project, and as they spoke, Ethan noticed a shift within himself. He was no longer the man who chased after hollow accolades. He was becoming someone who valued authenticity and connection. However, as the days turned into weeks, Ethan stumbled upon a shocking revelation. He was reviewing the company's financial statements when a discrepancy caught his eye. Digging deeper, he discovered a trail of embezzlement that led straight back to his former partner. Heart racing, he realized the extent of the betrayal. Ethan wasted no time. He reported the findings to the authorities, knowing that justice had to be served. It was a bittersweet moment. He felt a sense of closure, but also sadness for the friendship that had been tainted by greed and deceit. As the dust settled, Ethan and Thomas emerged from their respective battles stronger and more resolute. They celebrated their victories together, raising glasses filled with hope and new beginnings. In that moment, Ethan understood that true success lay not in wealth or status, but in the bonds forged through integrity, kindness, and a shared journey toward a better life. They were not just two men from different worlds. They were allies, friends, and partners in the pursuit of something far greater than themselves.